how to create a BI team or business intelligence team. So as Maria already introduced me, my name is Thomas Boxall. I am the current president of CIPS Saskatchewan, and I am a fully certified CIPS member with my I.S.P, ITCP. And then in addition to that, I have a series of other certifications. The most important one here would be my TOGAF certification. So I come to this presentation with over 10 years of direct IT experience with regards to setting up and managing BI teams. And this presentation will be focusing around the intent of the processes that I always take when coming into an organization to setting up a team from scratch. But before we do that, for those who don't know, we have a lot of guests on the line from all across the world. CIPS is, or the Canadian Information Processing Society, is Canada's IT professional organization, and we are responsible for ensuring the promotion of ethics and professionalism of the IT industry in Canada. We have three designations that we manage: the I.S.P, the ITCP, and the AITP designation. The AITP designation is the designation that we give to students who graduate from a CIPS accredited university. And the I.S.P and ITCP designations are legally recognized IT professional designations, the I.S.P within Canada and the ITCP as an international regulation. In addition to that, CIPS is also does accreditation of university programs and provides opportunities such as this to do professional development. For more information about CIPS, our designations, and our different activities that we do, I heavily encourage you to go to CIPS.ca. So this is going to be the agenda that I'm going to be going through today. First off is why are you here? Why should you go down the path of creating a business intelligence or BI team within your organization, and what is it going to do for your organization? And then after that, we'll go through the three-phase process that I've always gone through for every organization that I've worked with over the last 10 years, and set up the steps that I've always followed to get the highest level of success of being able to have a BA team and then be able to maintain it long term. As I go through this presentation, I encourage you, if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. Maria will be monitoring the chat, and she will present those questions as we go through the presentation. So do not feel that you're interrupting the process. Just if you have any questions, make sure to write them down. Without further ado, so why do you need a BI team? So the big four questions that I always have when going to an organization and saying, why do you need business intelligence? These are the four major questions that I always ask. First is a question about culture. What are you attempting to do with your organization with regards to your data? So the traditional way that reporting was done was we had KPIs, and KPIs were about measuring specific outcomes. And a lot of these KPIs over the past 30 years have been based around, I have a hunch, let's measure it, and let's confirm that my hunch is correct. BI, and specifically advanced analytics, is more about, I have no clue what's going on. Let's figure out what's going on, and let's ask questions and focus the work that we're doing towards what those answers are and how they can be best serve the organization as a whole. Second thing that I ask a lot of clients and projects is, do you find that you're missing out on opportunities? Do you have competitors that are winning bids on you when you have a superior product, superior team, superior skills? Or are you missing deadlines that for those RFPs that they're putting out? They're just you just cannot get the information in place quickly enough to be able to present it. Or you're finding out after you do a project that there was a bunch of things that you missed and that you if you could do it all over again, you would do them much differently. These are all sort of indicators that you're being reactive instead of proactive. Can you explain your business? And when I say explaining your business and how it works, I mean not to a peer, not to somebody who has the background knowledge of your organization, but can you explain it to your kids? Can you explain it to your grandparents? Can you explain it to the CEO of a company that you're trying to sell your product to? Somebody with no background of the information, the context of how your applications, how your systems, how your products and services work. Can you explain that to them? One of the big trends that's happening right now in the data world is that we've always been pushing for that transparency. Always have that transparency. Always have the ability for somebody to look at you and say, "Yes, I fully I fully understand what is being presented, and I'm going to be open and clear about it." But one of the problems is that now that we're starting to get into really large data sets, especially within private organization large data sets, uh, it's too much information, and the human mind cannot gather in that information and do a proper assessment of that information. So the one thing you need to be able to do is say, there's all this information. I have this information so that if an auditor wanted to go through it, they can verify that what I'm saying is true. But you need to be able to explain that data to the people that are making the decisions about that. If you can't do that, you may need a BI team. And finally, do you leverage your lessons learned? Most organizations since the 1990s have gotten into the point of creating lessons learned for every single project. But in most cases, those lesson learns get put into a file folder, taken over to the cabinet, dumped in the cabinet, and nobody ever looks at it again. Uh, you need, as an organization, to be able to take everything that you're doing right and everything that you're doing wrong and apply it to everything you're doing within your organization. You need to so one of the my backgrounds is in TOGAF and being an IT architect. You need to take those transition states, those enterprise level transition states, and you need to be able to say, what did we do right and what did we do wrong in the previous iteration, and start applying that to what we're doing right now, and then keep on building that iteration after iteration, step after step as you go along. So, how do we do this? So, first thing is create a plan. So, the biggest problem most organizations have right off the bat is they want to jump right into the deep end of the pool. They want to automatically say, well, we're going to do AI ML right now. We're going to do the big data mining on our data sets right now. And as a result, what ends up happening is that they stumble, they fall, they fail, and the whole process is abandoned until a few years later, somebody says, "Oh, this would be great. Let's do this. Let's create this BI team. Let's create this analytics. Let's do AI, and let's go at it." And then they make the same problems again. Step one is you need to crawl before you walk, walk before you run. So you need to make a plan. I break down my plans into 3 steps. First step is I create a series of catalogs. So I usually do a data catalog, a reporting catalog, an entity diagram, um, and then I also throw in there other documentation such as I call it the stakeholder address book, identifying who in the organization is the specific data owner tied directly to the data that's coming through in your reporting system. Create all that documentation, map it all out, and then that way, when you're going forward, you know exactly who to talk to and when to talk to them. Second is again the address stakeholder address book. The big thing here is You want at a very early level to get your business users and your business owners to tie in or to buy into your BI team and the value that they have. You want to have that close collaborative work environment with them. You want them to be as much of a driver to how you're going to go forward as the work that you're doing is going to provide that. And fundamentally, you want them to drive the priority of the work that you're doing. Tie everything back to business priority, business value. You're doing the heavy lifting, but they're doing the prioritization, and they're making the choices on what is valuable and what is not valuable. Usually, the first task that I do with my stakeholders is I'll bring in a business analyst or a BA, and I will create business use cases. So these are just very simple stories going through every single element within their systems as a insert a role here when some trigger here, then outcome expected. And I'll make thousands of these business use cases, and I'll have the business prioritize them. What is the number one priority? What's second, third, fourth? From those business use cases, what I'll do is then I'll do what's called a gap analysis. And in the gap analysis, the big thing that I want to do is I want to see, again, using the TOGAF methodology, where you have a goal state and you have your current state. How big of a chasm do we have here? What is the difference between where we are right now and where we want to be? And how painful is it going to be to get there from here? So what do you need to do to get to do these three steps? So first thing you want to do is you want to analyze your skills. You want to do a skills analysis, like a skill gap analysis. The main tool that I use for this is usually a skills matrix. So specifically what you want to do is you want to see what your current state is going to be, or what you perceive your current state to be, and what is the market skills that are driving that area. Compare it to what you have right now and determine what skills do I need, what can I train up on, what do I need to hire for. So a perfect example of this is if you're on, say, a legacy Oracle uh, system with everybody fully trained up and fully qualified in the Oracle tools, and you want to switch to AWS and drive everything through AWS and Tableau. How do I take my Oracle DBAs and train them up to be able to be usable within AWS? How do I train my Tableau developers and convert them to the latest tools that they would be using in AWS? For your data, you want to you want to be brutal with your data, your existing data. You want to look at how you have it structured, how you have it organized, how easy it is to maintain, how easy is it to upgrade, and you want to basically divide your data into rough categories, basically a spectrum of really bad to really good, and you want to base it around maintainability and business value. If you have existing data that's sitting in your database and nobody's touched it in 10 years, there's probably a reason for that. Likewise, if it takes you a month to do one simple request within your data, maybe you should look at what you need to do to optimize that. Infrastructure. So infrastructure, you want to know how complex your system is. So there's a really good tool out there called Cynefin, and Cynefin is basically just it's a complexity methodology. It's broken down into four categories: simple, complicated, complex, chaos. Uh, you want to know roughly where your overall architecture is in that scope of Cynefin, and you want to try to optimize it and simplify it where you can, so that you can move from chaos to complex, complex to complicated, complicated to simple. You may not all everything may not get to, and probably will not get to simple, but you kind of want to move towards that. But first step is, where are you at currently? So, gold standards. I just want to touch a little bit on gold standards here for a second. So the big things that you want to drive in your organization is um, four major areas. Security. Security should be baked into everything you do within BI. Maintainability. If you can't maintain it, you can't serve it. Adaptability. You want to be able to make whatever you build now usable for your future state, but also your future's future state. And valuable. Everything you do needs to have some sort of business value to it. Maria, I saw there was a couple pops up of questions. Are there any questions in the chat that I should answer before I go on?
Not at this time. Let's save them for the end.
Okay.
And can I ask Aslam to please turn your camera off? This is being recorded. Thank you.
Documentation. So once you've gathered all the different areas that you're going to be concerned with, the next step is documentation. You want to go through all of your documentation that you have currently, and you want to look at creating new documentation that you're going to need for your future state. Things that you want to keep anything that is up to date. If you have a procedural documentation that hasn't been used for 5 years, throw it out. You want to use documentation that fully defines what your organization is. So, as an example, years ago, I used to work for IBM. We used to have white papers on everything. They were a gold mine for understanding exactly how the system worked and how the system operated, to the point where I was able to pull a white paper for an old i7 mainframe computer when I did a contract for somebody, and the information was still valid, even though it was written back in the late 1970s, early 1980s. These are the sort of documents you want to bring across. Change logs, business use cases. If you have business use cases from a previous project, bring those across. You want to throw out anything that is irrelevant, old, out of date, and useless, basically. The big things that you want to bring forward though is you want to bring forward your most up-to-date data diagrams. So the data diagrams are the ones that show the primary key, foreign key relationships within your current data warehouse. Entity diagrams showing the data sources, the business users, and the system interactions that on how the data flows through your system. Data catalogs, both the technical and business data definitions. So what is the data called in the back end? What's it called in the front end? Why is it important? And also included in that data catalog, have your terminology and definitions documentation. That will define exactly when. A perfect example is I did a contract for a crop company, and when you say program to them, it was not the same thing that what probably everybody on this call thinks is a program. It was not a piece of software. It was an actual government program, i.e., an initiative with subsidies attached to it. Have those definitions and terminology documentations handy. They're a lifesaver in this process. You want to have your stakeholder address book. So you want to know org charts, who are your data owners, who are the managers, who are the people working in the data, who are the people maintaining it, who are the subject matter experts in each of the business areas. So they may not be touching the data, but if you ask them questions, they'll be able to answer them with the business logic around that. You want to have your transition plans, especially if you are working within an enterprise architecture group. Use the organizational TOGAF transition plan. So how is the organization planning to transition change over the next 5, 10, 15 years? You want to have the latest policies and procedures documentation. So how is everything done? If there's a policy management tool that is used, even better. If it's just paper documents like Word documents, good enough. And finally, you want to review with your security team the access and security control that you have currently within your organization, and more importantly also is why they set up things the way they do and how they set up things the way they do. You're going to be using that information to build security into your new systems. So gap analysis. Uh, the biggest thing with the gap analysis is that you're trying to figure out what is wrong, or not, sorry, what is different, not what is wrong. You're trying to find out what is different. Um, this is not the stage to solution what you're going to be doing when you're creating your BI team. This is just to see where you have deficiencies. You're basically wanting to create a wish list out of this. So what you're doing is you're going through all the different areas, so people, technology, infrastructure, and you're basically saying, this is where we want to be, this is where we're at, here's all the things that we're going to have to work on. Tie those back to your business use cases. So again, I got to reiterate this. Do not solution at this stage. You're just trying to figure out where you have deficiencies, and that you categorize those deficiencies, capture them, and make them aware, make the stakeholders aware of what those deficiencies are so that they can prioritize their business use cases according to those deficiencies. If you're going to be doing a RFP for a brand new system, so you're planning to not build a BI system within your own organization, just have it maintained by a BI team that you're going to create, and you're going to have a consultant come in, or you have, Microsoft, Oracle, Amazon come in and create your system. Your gap analysis is going to be the criteria that have to be fulfilled by your RFP. Also, as you do your gap analysis, you're going to want to identify any point that is irrelevant. So you may have a gap. As an example, if you have, there was one organization that we had that we were taking them from old mainframe computers to a brand new cloud system. They hadn't updated their systems in about 25 years. Uh, all of the senior maintainers of the mainframe system they had a classification called retiree on call, or ROC. They were there to keep the lights on until the mainframe turned off. There was a gap analysis identified that they did not have the skills to maintain the cloud infrastructure. We did our gap analysis, and the business said, well, they're all ROCs. We don't care that they don't have the cloud skill set, because once this project's done, they're going to say thank you very much, and they're going to go to the retirement homes, and they're going to completely forget about ever working again. So we'll sign off that this is not a deficiency. This does not need to be included in the gap analysis. Always have your gaps in your gap analysis verified against the business on whether they actually are a actual gap, or just something that is, yeah, just sign off on it. It's fine. If that goes away, it doesn't matter. So now that you have your gap analysis, you can now move on to the second step, which is building the foundation of your new BI system. So the big thing with this is one of the steps that usually ends up being skipped by a lot of organizations trying to go into building a BI team and build a BI system. They usually skip building this foundation step. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that you may have the best gap analysis around, but if you don't build those solid systems to build your BI on top of, what will end up happening is all of the strength of this solid stone layer underneath everything is not utilized, and you have to do the work of partially or fully all the work of this foundation layer as you go into data mining, AI, ML. So you need to have this strong foundation. So I've broken this down into four sections. Security is number one. If your new system is not secure, you're going to be fighting fires till the cows come home. Maintainability is number two. You want to make sure that everything you build isn't throwaway work and you're not replicating the same things over and over again. You also want your new system to be a pleasure for the people maintaining it. You want the system to be better than what you had before. Adaptability. You're going to change your system eventually. The whole point of BI is that it's an iterative process. It's an you follow an iterative method, and you want to build on that. So you want to make sure that you don't paint yourself into a corner and build a system that is unmaintainable afterwards. That you'd have to toss the whole thing and start from scratch again. And finally, I have a methodology that I developed when I was working for a startup company called business-driven design. It's essentially agile, but it's agile that's very easy to sell, and it's based around business value. And you want to always push back on what does the business want, what does the direction the business want to go, what is the business willing to sacrifice in order to get exactly what they need. Security. Um, I have always had a preference for a permissive security model. So permissive security model basically states if you're not on the list, you're not getting in. So this is the bouncer at the club. If you're not on the list, you're not getting in. No matter how much you plead, beg, borrow, it doesn't matter. Permissive security models work under four levels of access control. The most basic level, and typically in this basic level, it's nope. Default access. Nope, you're not getting in. You can make exceptions within your default access. So as an example, if you have public access information that you're making available to the wider public, you will put it into your default access uh, classification. But in most cases, nothing sensitive should be in this layer. The second layer above that is the authorized access. This is based on the position that the person is in the organization, not the user themselves. And I reiterate that their position, not the user. And when you build your security models around the position rather than the user, when that user moves to a different position, or when that position gets abolished, or God forbid, somebody gets fired, you're not worrying about finding where this person is throughout your entire organization and going there with a scalpel and trying to cut them out of every single security role that they're in. You're just in your HR system, you're just pulling them out of the one position and throwing them into another position, or pulling them out and dropping them. Or you're bringing in a brand new person and you're putting them into a position, and then all the security gets applied on top of it. You build your security rules around what does this position need to do their job. And then that way you change your rules, you audit your rules based on those principles as well. So project work is a perfect example of this. You create a project security group, and then anybody who gets assigned to the project gets put into that security group. When the project is done, you kill that security group, and then all that access that those people used to have as part of the project is now gone. Privileged access. So this is for short periods only. This is, I am doing a massive upgrade to the most sensitive data source that I have within my organization. And I want to make sure that I don't have to go in every month and double check that this person still needs access. So you basically say to this is, for this time period, you will have this access, and we're going to be monitoring it very, very closely to see exactly what you're doing with that access for that time period. At the end of this period, if you do not renew, put in a request to have it renewed, you will lose your access. These privileged access users must be scrutinized, must have oversight over them. That everything that they do must be fully recorded. And then finally, your highest level is basically privileged access with auto renewing, and these are your administrators. You should have very few, highly scrutinized, highly like high levels of oversight on these people, and they should be able to only access from very specific ways. One of the more common methods that I've seen within organizations is that administrators can only access their systems from a very specific VM. So you create a VM for them. The person has authorized access to that VM, and then their administrator has access from that VM to whatever they need to get done. One point with security before I move on is that a good practice with security for those who are not authorized is don't send back a permission denied. Especially for instance, like default access. If somebody is not authorized to see information and it's in the default access, send back a 404 error, not found. These sort of error messages are better for from a security point of view because it's basically says like you just don't it doesn't exist for you, and as it shouldn't. Maintainability. I always had I love this quote here. It's again when I worked for this startup organization, we like I made a big huge poster and I put it on the wall right above all the developers, and it basically said, "Design your code as if a serial killer is maintaining it, and he knows where you live." The big thing with that is that if you're always thinking about whenever you're doing any sort of work, what am I going to think about this 6 months from now? What is a brand new person to my team going to think about this code that I've just developed 6 months from now, or when they come onto the team? You want to make your future selves jobs easier than the job that you had right now, and everything that you do for your development of your systems needs to follow into these two major categories of maintainability. First, living documentation. You should have a policy within your teams that I don't care if you've mastered and memorized the procedurals, the policies and procedures for this process. Open up the documentation, and as you're going through the process, verify that the documentation is correct and update it if it's not. By having your expert people keeping the documentation up to date and accurate, your new people won't suffer. So when they're like, I have no idea what this is, I have no idea how to do this, the documentation will be accurate and it won't be as intimidating. Same thing with if you have a brand new process, put your most senior person on it and have them record every single step. Even if you have to record your screen while they're doing the process and then go through afterwards and create the steps in a documentation and then make that documentation available for your teams. Make it so that you're doing it, make it living, make it always refreshed. Empower your team to always keep your documentation up to date and accessible. Second, minimize complexity, maximize the efficiency of everything you do. Always work towards making your systems better. So I touched on Cynefin a little earlier on. It is if you've never seen it before, I highly recommend the method. Just I have a Cynefin poster on my cubicle wall just as a reference point. Essentially, like I said, you want to start with stuff that's chaotic. You want to try to make it complex. Stuff that's complex, you want to make it complicated. Stuff that's complicated, you want to make it simple. And the idea behind Cynefin is that how much strain can something like how much effort do you have to put into something to get it to resolve? Chaos. It doesn't matter how much effort you put into it. You're never going to make headway unless you solve certain fundamental things about the problem. Complex, you need to basically do a project. Complicated, you need to follow a lot of the steps in order to complete it. And simple is open up the documentation, follow the steps, you're done. Uh, Efficiency. One of the easiest things that you can do for efficiency is I call it Tech Debt Fridays. So Google does this, Microsoft does this, Amazon does this, EA does it. Uh, Countless organizations do this. They do some form of Tech Debt Fridays or 10% time or uh, spare time, whatever they want to call it. But essentially, what you want to do is you want to every person that's maintaining your system, you want to dedicate a specific slice of their time per week per pay period, and say you cannot schedule any meetings or any deadlines within this slot. And then within that slot, the individuals have free reign to go into the tech debt backlog, pull an item from random from there, and get it done. So these are all these items that just end up building up over time. And there's stuff like, oh, this query is, 90% of the way there. It's functional. It's met MVP. Tech Debt Friday, you'd go back and say, okay, I need to do this, I need to do this, do this. Okay, now it's 100% complete. Those are the items that are in your tech debt. And the final thing that I wanted to touch on before I move on is the Boy Scout method. So the Boy Scout motto is always leave a campsite better than the way you found it. And your data system should be the same way. You need to have this culture within your organization, from data enters, like data entry people, all the way to executives. Everybody who touches a system should look at the system and say, oh, hey, that value is wrong, and I have the ability to change that value right now. I'm going to go in there and I'm already in there. I'm going to fix it. If everybody has that mentality of Boy Scouting everything that they touch, you'll eventually get to that good data. You want to get away from the concept of bad data in, bad data out, or sorry, garbage in, garbage out. Iterative development, and specifically adaptability. I always, so this, anybody who knows this logo, it's the standard iterative development logo. Do plan, check. I got another slide that goes into the different details. The big thing with adaptability is you always want to verify what you're doing. You always want to make sure that you have you're not blocking off unnecessary possibilities into your future. And you always want to code to both the industry standards and your internal standards. So don't paint yourself into a corner. Don't automatically say, I'm not going to do XYZ because of whatever reasons. If you have a good reason to do something, then do it. But don't just like, as an example would be is uh, if you're going to develop a fact dim table within your database, and you say, well, I'm not going to bring in information from this one system because it's a pain in the ass to put the time and effort to develop it, so we're just never going to do it. And I'm going to lock off all design within my thing to explicitly exclude that system. A year later, that system becomes the most primary system for your one of your main key business areas. And like, well, we need to bring this data in. Now you have to break your entire design in order to include that data in. If you had just said at the beginning, okay, well, we don't have the time and effort to include this system in here, but because we know these criteria of the system and what they will need, we will not exclude that functionality from being designed against. Example of this would be is if you have a address field, don't exclude apartment number as one of the fields in there, because then you're automatically excluding apartments from ever being a part of your address field. You always want to consider that what you'll need to add in the future as part of your design, and don't unnecessarily exclude something. And finally, business-driven design. So this is the general flow that I follow with my business-driven design. So every iteration you need to be going to go through these cycles, and every iteration you want to run through these cycles. Business-driven design is a combination of standard Scrum, Agile, and with elements of elements of agile project management built into it. So the key thing to it is that you're trying to create a velocity and track to that velocity, and use that velocity to communicate with the business on how much work you're going to get done per iteration, how much work is in the queue, and how expensive that work is, so that they can make those informed decisions on what work that they would like to see your team work on. And you want to keep on going through these iteration cycles. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to finalize your priority queue. So your priority queue is just the list of all your business use cases. So the main things that you'll want to finalize your priority queues is velocity. Velocity is just the average number of user cases, user business cases you can get completed per developer per iteration. So if you have a 2-week iteration and 5 developers and they do 10 use cases, your velocity would be 2, because every iteration you can get 2 business use cases done per developer. You'll have a concept of the waterline. Waterline is how much work can you get done with the existing budget, resources, and time. So the iterations budget would be, if you only have 1 developer for the next iteration, 2 use cases is your waterline. If you're doing a project or many mini projects, and they say we'll give you the budget for 10 FTEs over 5 iterations, then you would take 2 times 10 FTEs, 10 developers, times 5 iterations, and that would become your waterline, and you put that on your priority queue. Second step is you create your iteration. Your iteration is just how, like, velocity times number of resources you have for that iteration. So one method that I've used for when doing you can go with just business user stories as a straight up, because usually business stories are quite small in size. But if you find within your organization that your user stories, or if they don't do user stories at all, and they instead want to go with number of reports, what you'll want to do is use a method called story points, and you want to do your velocity against number of story points per iteration. Story points just use a Fibonacci sequence. So 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. Take the previous 2 numbers, add them together, next number. And you'll go to your developers and say, this report, how complex is it on this scale? So if you have a report that's 13, is it more complex than this 13 number item, or less complex? If it's more complex, then maybe it's a 21. If it's way more complex, a 55. If it's less complex, maybe it's an 8. If it's really less complex, maybe a 2 or 3. By using a Fibonacci sequence, you get past the human mind has or human mental model works logarithmically, and by doing a Fibonacci sequence, you're counteracting that logarithmic scale that the human mind has, and it means that your estimates, especially by the time you get through a couple iterations, will become extremely accurate. After 5 years of the one major project I worked with, we were off by about 3 story points for every 150-ish story points per iteration. So it was very accurate. You want to use standard red-green refractor Scrum methodology for development. So you have your user stories; those are your test cases. You run all your test cases first. They're red. You failed them all. The developers code to those test cases, passes them all. They're green. You push that through the business users and say, are they acceptable? Yes, no. If they are acceptable, then great. If no, go back, refractor, retest, red, green, refractor. Rinse and repeat until you've got full client sign off. Once you have full client sign off, you deploy to prod, and you go back to the business users and say, do I need to add more business use cases? Do I need to change the order of the priority queue? Here's where the water line is. Are you happy with this? And then go back up to step 1. Finally. So now that you have this strong foundation, you're doing iterative development on your foundation. You have all of your documentation and all your documentation is living documentation. Your systems are being maintained and made more efficient every single iteration, and you've got a plan to move towards your EA final architecture. Now you finally can actually do the fun stuff. So advanced analytics. The big thing with advanced analytics is you're getting to the point where you're going to start causing cultural change within your organization. You're going to start moving from I've got a hunch and I want to answer. I think that the answer is X, Y, Z. To I wonder what if we did an analytics on blah, what would it say about X, Y, Z? So uh, continuous improvement is the first point about what you want to do. So everything we did in advanced analytics, you want to continue it forward. So hence the plan, do, check, act. That was the what I was trying to remember. So the big thing you want to do with continuous improvement is you have this strong foundation, but that foundation's only good as a point of time. As part of your advanced analytics, you want to slice off some time to always do CI. You always want to work towards, again, work towards that enterprise architecture final design. You want to have a 5, 10, 15-year plan, and you want to start working through those iterative cycles and keep your priority queue filled, keep your waterline adjusted to what the finances for your team is. Be fully available to explain what that means to your business users, and make sure you do that ongoing collaborative development with them. And this also includes going back right to the very beginning. Keep your skills up to date. Things are like the whole point of once you get to this part in with your BI team, things are going to be moving. Things are going to be adapting over time as the business changes, and you need to be adaptive with that. Have training plans, have upgrade plans, have audits and checks. Do DR tests. Just randomly ever so often, work with your infrastructure team and say, I want to do a full DR check. I want to see how quickly we can recover from a DR. Simulate a DR. Don't actually unplug something because that's bad, but do simulate it. Work off your tech debt. You will always build up tech debt, and the more you have, the more sluggy your system will be. Always work to reduce that. Data mining. So data mining is in contrast to AI and ML. Data mining is all about finding mitigating factors and contributing factors to what you're seeing in the data. So the goal behind data mining is first you need to have your data set in a condition where you can find the like you need your data diagram and your data entity model to be up to date and accurate, and you need to be able to connect that into an automated system so that you can do the data mining against it. You need to ensure sorry, I covered that. You need to make sure that when you're doing your data mining, that you can ask questions of your data sets, and then be able to have your algorithms go through your system and pull back what's contributing to this and what's mitigating this from happening. So, as an example, if you are a grocery store and you do a data mine of your inventory and point of sale system, you want to understand why like what are the contributing factors and mitigating factors on why every single product in your store is selling or not selling. Is it a supply issue in your inventory? If you're not getting enough supply in, that may be a mitigating factor to selling of that item. Is every time that you do a flyer, it's a contributing factor. You see a spike in the sale of that item. um, do you have certain brackets of the cost of the item that are in the mitigating versus contributing factor. All of these things, you want to have a full list of everything. And the biggest thing with this and running all this heuristic data against your system is no single item is a silver bullet. Everything that you see within your system, every question you ask about your data is going to have contributing and mitigating factors. There's no single silver bullet. It's going to be a combination of everything together. And by doing these processes, you're going to be figuring out exactly what is the path that you need to go as a organization to get to where you want it to be. So if you want to sell more toothbrushes, address the mitigating factors that are preventing the sale of toothbrushes, and emphasize the contributing factors. Find the trends within your data, and figure out what the overall trajectory of your data is going to be. This is more important for stuff like, uh, as an example, if you have a high level of injuries within your organization, are there trends that lead to higher rates of injuries within your organization? Figure those out, track them down, put them into a report, and make those reports available to the people that need to know. The big thing with business-driven design after you've fully started the process is always go back to your owners and always cultivate a culture around being data-driven and business-driven design. So you always want to go back to your business users, business owners. You always want to keep your stakeholder address up to date, and you always want to go back to them and say, "Hey, how are things doing?" Like maybe it's you take the director out for a cup of coffee someday, or maybe it's you sit down with a bunch of people from a specific group that, especially if their usage starts dropping off of your analytics system. Why are you guys like what's wrong with the reports? How can we make them better? Always try to be proactive and collaborative with your users, and always get them to take ownership as much as they can, influence the system as much as they can to make the system the best version of itself. One thing that I always try to do bake it into my BDD whenever I get it fully up and running within an organization, is I tried to optimize the processes and procedures within an organization so that the most uh, default, logical, simplest, and streamlined process is the process that that the organization wants you to go down. And the most cumbersome, convoluted, bureaucratic, and annoying process is the most unwanted process that the organization wants you to go down. If you can get to that point where you can refine your system down to it, where, like I said, you'll have example, if you a GIS system, the people who are entering the addresses, if they're going into a bunch of addresses day after day after day, they'll naturally say, oh, hey, this should say, Saskatchewan, it says Saskatchewan. So make it a part of the culture of your organization. Make it so that the data that if they want good data, they know that they are part of the solution of that. And they're not afraid to come to you and say, I want to see X, Y, Z. AI and ML. So first thing, bit of advice. Don't rush. Don't rush it. Make sure you have a plan of action and you have a desire on where you want to go with AI and ML. What is the business case that you're trying to solve? How is it going to provide you that value? How are you going to repeat it and keep on repeating it? There are multiple different models that you can use within AI and ML, and all of them can provide value if you implement them in the appropriate way. So, genetic models, uh, heuristic design, um, The whole point of AI and ML is you want to get to the point where you're trying to answer questions. You're trying to give the business the why. So they have the question, what, and you're giving them a why it is the way it is. So if they see sales are reduced are dropping down, then you need to be able to say they're dropping down because of these reasons, and this is the model that we use to get to it. One thing to point out is that AI should not be, you should not treat AI and ML as a employee. It is a tool. And the one policy, like what's happening right now is, and CIPS is actually going to be having a panel discussion on AI and ML policies in July, June. I always recommend the NATO policy. NATO has had a policy in place ever since they started doing automated drones, and it's a human must always pull the trigger. So within your organizations, you should always have the idea that if you're running advanced AI and ML against your data, the answers that come out of it should not be what you action. A human must take responsibility for whatever action is done, but it should inform them on what is a good process. So as an example, if you're an insurance company and the AI says you should reject this claim, you don't reject the claim. You look at why the AI ML is saying you should reject this claim, and then either accept it or deny it. I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to. So to sum up everything before we can get to questions, because I want to make sure we have some time for questions here. Step one, create a plan. Fully understand what you have and what you're capable of doing, and get all your ducks in a row before you even start the process of going down and creating a BI team. Step number two, build your tools out. Make sure that you have a foundation in place that you can build on top of and start working from. Make it so that it is easy to do your advanced analytics. And finally, do your advanced analytics. Make sure that it's designed to answer the questions that your business has. Make sure that it provides value, and make sure that it's secure.